All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Huntington. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge for the Environmental Protection Agency, Office of Inspector General, Office of Investigations. So we're based here out of San Francisco, at least my office is. I cover the agents that are working here in San Francisco and up in Seattle. And we cover all of Region 9 and 10. So we also all fall under the Western Region Field Office, which is based out of Denver, where the Special Agent in charge sits. And he covers everything west of the Mississippi for investigation purposes for EPA OIG. We have an office within the Region 9 building, so we are co-located with EPA Region 9, so all the folks you've been talking to and interacting with, we interact with them on probably a not as frequent basis, but sometimes we are out there helping out and working with them. So I'll get started. You're here for the fraud awareness briefing. We like giving this briefing to tribal members and representatives of the tribes, just because there's a lot of grant money that goes to EPA tribes, and that means there's a lot of chances for fraud, waste, and abuse of that money that goes out there. And we're hoping that with this type of presentation, you can have that takeaway or go back to where you're working and where you live, and you can possibly see some of those indicators of what might not be right and help us put a stop to like this money disappearing and actually being used to for the purposes that you guys are putting in for these grants. But we'll also go over what the role of the EPA OIG is and like who we are really. So let's get started. Oh, and as we have questions, Jeanette has been very kind to stand by and answer questions. We're kind of like field the questions, and then she'll interrupt if I miss it, because I more than likely will miss any questions that pop up. I am a Zoom rookie, so I apologize. But let's keep going. All right, so the overview. We have the Office of Inspector General, which is an independent agency. It does not work for the EPA. It is very much tied to what the EPA is, but it is an independent agency. So we have within the OIG, we have the Office of Investigations, where we work like fraud and everything else. So this is all we're going to go over, like who we are, what the fraud is. I'm going to show you what some case examples look like, and then how you might be able to attack those risks. So the Office of Inspector General. We have the IG himself, which is Sean O'Connell. He was prior U.S. Department of Justice, working with all the U.S. Attorney's offices, and he has a very strong civil background. He's wearing two hats right now. He's the Inspector General for EPA OIG, and then he's also the Acting Inspector General for Department of Defense. So he's a very busy man, but he is very engaged with what we do with EPA OIG. Very hands-on, very like really into it. Underneath him, you have the Deputy Inspector General, and then you have the Office of Investigations, Office of Audit and Evaluation, Management, and then Congressional and Public Affairs. So basically what I can tell you about will be Office of Investigations, and that's what we're really looking at here. What audit and evaluation does and management does, that's a whole different realm, and that's something that they dig into the weeds on, like to do audits of any kind of program or anything that the EPA has a touch on. So we're going to deal with the Office of Investigations today. Our authority, we grab our authority from the IG Act of 1978. And it is one of those things that it kind of encompasses all the IGs. So basically every major agency and department has an Inspector General for the most part. The majority of us do have an Office of Investigations where we are special agents, and we have the power to investigate these things. And it also brings along the power to arrest, seize, and do other things that federal law enforcement would be able to do. And we're not just looking at the EPA, but also the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board. That's pretty quiet on that front usually for us, so it's usually the EPA. We are an independent office, like I said. We're here to promote economy and efficiency, and it's the three big things: fraud, waste, abuse, lying, cheating, stealing. That's what we're looking for. So we do have access to all EPA records. We are constantly looking for things in our investigations, so that requires us to go to the EPA and say, hey, we need access to this information. So the IG Act of 1978, that gives us the authority to do so. And then in the manual for EPA, it also helps explain that we have this ability to go and seize these records if we need to, not necessarily seize, but also just pull them and use them as part of our investigation. And then here's the Office of Investigations. We are the law enforcement arm of the OIG. To put it in a way that we would like to say, we are the gun toters. We are the government code is 1811, special agents. It is the same thing as an FBI special agent, DEA, HSI, any other special agent that works for any other federal law enforcement officer. That's exactly what the special agents with Office of Investigations are. Our top priorities, again, fraud, waste, abuse, all that stuff. Criminal wrongdoing, allegations of misconduct. So that could be for employees of the EPA or contractors of the EPA, because the EPA is paying them money, so we have a vested interest in what they're doing. And then computer intrusion and cybercrime. This is a small office that we have in the DC area, and they are active with people trying to get into EPA systems. So we do have the statutory law enforcement authority to conduct criminal investigations. Here's a breakdown of obviously the regions for EPA, and that's basically where we put our offices. It makes it simple. Why do we need to break the mold? Why do we need to make it even more confusing? So if you have something that's going on in Region 9, we have an office there to help you out, and that's where we're sitting. If you got a buddy that's sitting over in Colorado and they need to talk to somebody within the investigations, we have an office in Denver, right there with Region 8. Same thing up in Seattle. All right, the investigative process for us. The intake of the complaint. It's not always clear cut how a complaint comes in. Sometimes people use the hotline, which is great, and that's an amazing tool that's out there. But we also have direct contact. So that's me just having relations with the people that work within EPA, and then them gaining a trust in me to say, hey, you know what, something might be wrong over here, we need to look into. It could also be the relations that my agents have out in the field dealing directly with, we'll say, tribes at this point, where they are used to dealing with someone there that might be able to provide them information. Or we might get an audit referral from within EPA OIG. So once we get that, I'll get that contact information, and then we'll assign it to an agent to start investigating. So this agent will make a determination. I'm sorry, which screen are we guys seeing? Because I feel like I'm, all right. Hey, Jeanette, can you tell me which screen you guys are seeing?
Yeah, I'm seeing the investigative process screen,
right.
starting with intake of the complaint.
Right, I apologize, because it shows like a little red line around this one. So again, I thought I was sharing this other screen, and I was sharing my notes, and I was going to show you guys that I'm cheating and reading off stuff. All right, so we assign it to an agent, and then they start doing the investigative process. And an agent, just think about any kind of police show or detective show. It's the same thing. They're going to go out, they're going to start asking questions, they're going to start doing interviews, they're going to put documents. Except on this side of the house, we're a little bit more heavy on the document analysis, because it's fraud, waste, abuse. It's documents. It's like digging into the paperwork and into the numbers. Then they're going to begin the inquiry. That's where they're going to really dive into it. And this can include subpoenas. It could include subject interviews, pulling someone in and really getting into the interview with them and ask them direct questions as to what was going on with the potential fraud. And then we're going to present to the appropriate entity for action. This could be a whole gambit of like where this case could be presented to. Because we're federal law enforcement, our first choice is to obviously go to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we'll present for either criminal or civil prosecution. We also have other avenues that we can go down where we can present to suspension and debarment. If the person or entity can be found to not be trustworthy with government money, then we can show suspension and debarment these facts, and then they can make the determination whether or not to suspend or debar the individual or institution. And then we also have the ability to present to the EPA itself. If it's a whistleblower case, the whistleblower will come forward, we'll do the investigation, and then we provide the information to the agency, and the agency has a chance to respond and provide corrective action to whoever is receiving the money from the agency. So there's a whole different like sections that we may end up going to, and it just all depends on the type of case. Tools for investigators, we have the False Claims Act. So with that, it's a federal civil law that imposes monetary penalties on persons and entities who knowingly make false statements or claims for the purpose of defrauding the government. A great thing about this tool is we can actually get 3 times the amount that the person, like 3 times the amount that was caused by the damages caused by that person. So it could be a lot of money that comes back, and it's a good tool to have in our pocket. We also have what's called PIFCRA, or the Program Fraud Civil Remedies Act. It's the Mini False Claims Act. So this provides an administrative remedy to executive branch agencies related to false, fictitious, or fraudulent claims and statements where an alleged liability is less than $150,000. So if the EPA OIG determines an action under PIFCRA is warranted, we can submit a report of investigation to the EPA General Counsel, and then the General Counsel can seek approval from the Department of Justice to pursue the initiation of administrative proceedings before an administrative law judge. So this isn't really going in front of like a federal court. It's being taken care of through agency action. And then we have suspension and debarment, like I talked about. And then we have mandatory disclosures and referrals to the agency for additional action. So we can always kick back stuff to the agency and say, hey, something's not going on correctly with this grant that's being handed out. Take a deeper look, and maybe they're non-compliance. All right, so let's get into potential fraud indicators. These are the big ones, right? Bribery, kickbacks, labor mischarging, all this stuff. We're going to get into some of these here. So on the screen, you're going to see Duke University agrees to pay US $112.5 million to settle False Claims Act allegation related to scientific research misconduct. This was an EPA OIG investigation that led to that kind of recovery of money. This woman, Tracy Bronson, embezzled $573,000 from the Conservation District. And then former EPA agent sentenced for making a false statement in connection with pyramid schemes. So when they say EPA agent, they're not talking about EPA OIG. EPA does have their own special agents they're called a criminal investigative division. And they're the ones that are doing the environmental crimes. And they're very good at what they do, but sometimes people make bad choices. All right. Grant and contract fraud indicators. All right, this is where we really dive into the paperwork. So indicators of potential grant and contract fraud include, but are not limited to, these things right up here, the lack of separation of duties. So you have someone that's authorizing the check, and then you have that same person signing the check. And then that same person is responsible for going to deposit it at the bank. That leads itself to some serious issues of potential fraud. So that money could disappear, or the money may not be written out as appropriate as it should have been. So you want to make sure that you have different people for different levels of that same job, and it kind of keeps everybody in line. Like, hey, I signed that, so don't mess it up, because then my name's also on there. So we want to separate duties. Undisclosed personal or organizational conflicts of interest. This is going to be one of the biggest things, conflicts of interest. You can, pretty much anybody can like clear themselves as long as they notify, especially notify their superiors, or supervisors, or the government, whoever they need to notify, that they are involved with some other type of organization, some other type of business dealing. It's when people try to hide it, that's when we get the issue of, you know, then you got to go, like, you're creating false documents, you're creating fraudulent statements. These are things that are going to get people hemmed up. Management override of key internal controls. So the management is just sweeping things under the rug, or the management is, you know, they know what's going on and they are taking action to help further the fraud. And then failure to account for transactions. So be self-explanatory. All right. Case examples. All right, so I'm going to slow it down. We'll go through these, and we'll kind of discuss on how you're identifying fraud, and then kind of show how it works out. So for this case example, in the background, we have a finance director for a tribal grant recipient embezzling EPA grant funds. So that's our main like allegation that's going on. So the possible fraud indicators are lack of controls and separation of duties. All right, so I'm going to read over the case for you. On March 1st, 2019, David McGraw, a finance director for the Yukon River Intertribal Watershed Council in Alaska, was sentenced in the U.S. District Court for the District of Alaska to 18 months imprisonment in order to pay restitution in the amount of $40,604 for theft and filing a false tax return. McGraw willfully misapplied over $310,000 of grant funds for his personal benefit. All right, we got a finance director. He's in charge of this EPA grant, and he's able to just pocket the money and keep going. The executive director of the tribe stated publicly that McGraw's impact went beyond misappropriated funds of $315,000. So the impact that I calculated and shared with the court was more than $2.2 million. That has meant our backhaul program, which provided support and assistance to tribes to remove hazardous solid waste from their communities in 2014, that essentially stopped. All right, we have a gentleman here that is in charge of the grant. There was little to no oversight over what he was doing. So his duties are like, he's running everything. He's making sure that all the paperwork, all this stuff goes through. There's no supervision over what he's doing. So it's also a failure on his supervisors. But that's not always going to be charged. But the failure on, there's lack of control over like what he's doing, and he's keeping all the duties to himself. So this money, nobody would know where it's going and what it's being used for until he says what it is. He willfully misapplied. So this willfully misapplied, this is going to be something the legalese, right, for the lawyers and the attorneys in the U.S. Attorney's Office to take care of. We have to show that he didn't do this just out of error, that he didn't do this because he just didn't know what he was doing and like he just filed the wrong paperwork. He was shown to take this money and use it for his personal gain when this money was solely for the tribe and for this project that they had going on. So he got 18 months imprisonment, restitution of $40,000, and then $121,000 in restitution to the Watershed Council. That's a big hit. 1.5 years in prison doesn't sound all that fun to me. All right, so the next case then. An executive director of a Michigan conservation district was convicted of grant fraud, sentenced to 37 months in prison in order to pay $573,000 in restitution. Additionally, the individual was debarred from government contracts for a period of 10 years. The investigation revealed that the individual siphoned EPA grant funds to her personal accounts and spent them at the local casino. All right, so you got an executive director, an accountant. They're embezzling funds. So embezzling, they're making sure that the money is pretty much diverted from the accounts that it's supposed to go into personal accounts, either through cashier's checks or wire transfers, any method that can be used. Possible fraud indicators, lack of controls and separation. Again, you got two people that are involved with this. If they're working together, there's no other oversight. They got the duties to themselves. Easy for them to work on. Scheme identified. The individual stole EPA grant funds and siphoned them to personal accounts for use at the local casino. I like this for use at a local. They siphoned it, and then we just show that they went to the local casino and started gambling. But basically, the scheme is, hey, we got this money coming in from the EPA. We got no one really overseeing what the budget is that's coming in. They know that we got like this grant money, but they don't really know what it's being used for, what the percentages are for office supplies, for fuel, for travel. So if we say that we did X amount of travel, even though we really didn't, we get to keep another $5,000 in our pockets, and it goes into their pockets. So 37 months imprisonment, $573,000 restitution, and debarment from government contracts for 10 years. So debarment and suspension, that's a powerful tool. That means that these people, they can't go work for another tribe and start applying for grants. They are debarred. If we debar them, it comes up on it's a national database, and I would highly suggest that if you are involved with receiving grants, which I'm sure the majority of you are, you get onto this database and you start looking to see, like the individuals that you have engaged with or that are applying for positions that may require them to be working on grants or to apply for grants. Run them through and see if they're not supposed to be, because they can't, like if they put it through the paperwork and their name pops up, they can't get a grant. They can't work on that grant. They're pretty much blacklisted from industries where they should be working on grants. All right, let's mitigate the risk here. Let's figure out ways that you guys can prevent this stuff from happening. Site visits. get out there, go look at like where this work is supposed to be going on. I don't know why it has SBIR risk in there, but it still applies. SBIR is a Small Business Innovative Research, which if any of you have people that are into research and creating stuff, I highly recommend you look into it. It's a great program for money to spur innovative technologies. But it still applies. If you guys have like contract work where you're getting a grant to where work is supposed to be happening and your people are telling you like, we just spent $200,000 on X amount of equipment and work out on the site, go see if it's being done. Go see if it's happening. Inspect the work. If you're paying $250,000 for like certain pavement of a road or to upkeep of a wall for whatever, for to keep the water out or keep the water flowing in a certain direction, go see if that's happening. If it doesn't look like the $250,000 is being used correctly, it might not be, and it might be an indicator for you. Ensure all the work is being performed in accordance to the contract requirements, and report irregularities to potential criminal acts to the EPA OIG special agents or the hotline. If you have a suspicion, it doesn't hurt to report it out. This sounds a little bit shorter than I thought. So if you do have suspicion of fraud, waste, or abuse, these are your contacts. So please screenshot it, take a picture, write it down, whatever you got to do. Like these are the numbers. That hotline phone contact, don't get discouraged. If you call that, it may go, I will say, it will go to voicemail. But that doesn't mean that they're not checking it. They leave it to go to voicemail so they can do kind of like a triage of what comes in. They will review it and then they will call back the person if the person requests a callback. The best way, just because we're in modern technology and modern times, the best way is to shoot an email to the hotline if that's the way that you want to go. You can request to keep yourself anonymous, and there are certain things that kind of go along with that where we will do our best to try and make sure that happens. But another way to do this is to reach out to us directly, and you are hearing from the person that's right here in Region 9. You can email me, you can call me. If you just want to call and just gossip whatever, or drink some coffee and talk on the phone and discuss, like, what if this were to happen? Hey, I'll play the what if game with you and let you know what's going on, or like things that you might be able to look into. So if you have that suspicion but you're not ready to report, okay, call and talk to me. We'll just talk. I can't open up anything unless you give me details, but I'll point you in the right direction of like ways that you might be able to confirm your suspicion or not. So you can always give me a call. You can always shoot me an email. The hotline is there for you as well. And if you want to keep it anonymous, I mean, there's ways you can try and keep it anonymous with the hotline. If you tell them that you don't want them calling you back, I'm not going to call you back. But we will take the lead of whatever you guys give us, and we'll run with it. So my presentation actually ran kind of short. Last time we gave this, there was a lot of questions that we had, so we ran out of time with that. I'm hoping that you guys have questions. I'm up for anything. Otherwise, I may have run just a little too quick for you guys, and I apologize on that.
It looks like we just got a question in the chat box. If the tribe was going through a financial audit and they suspected fraud, would they contact you or a different agency?
Well, it depends. So if you're going through a financial audit and you're suspecting fraud from, let's say, if the fraud is in relation to like a specific or a specific program, you may want to go with that agency or program. So like a lot of tribes get money from EPA, they get money from HHS, DOI, HUD. So there's all these different agencies, right? And they each have their inspector general, and we all talk to each other. So if you know it's involving an EPA grant that comes through and there's fraud with that program, you would reach out to us. If it's something with like something for the clinic and HHS is funding that, you would want to reach out to HHS OIG and they'd be able to help. What we see a lot of times is this money that comes in from all the different grants goes into a single fund, which really isn't the way it's supposed to be done, but we all know that it happens. And that's what we call commingling of funds. And then at that point, we can't make a determination of where the money that's getting defrauded came from. So we all have a vested interest and we're all willing to open up on it. So I have a current investigation where that kind of happened, where the money is being embezzled from one location, one account, where the tribe was putting all their grant money into, and they were keeping track of like how much was coming in and where it was supposed to go. But because all the money was going in there, we couldn't tell you like which specific dollar came from which grant. So EPA OIG opened up, DOI OIG, Internal Investigation, Department of Interior, and Housing and Urban Development was on the investigation. So we all work together very closely. And if you have questions as to like who you should notify, you can always give me a call. I can always point you in the right direction. We have friends in all the different IGs. Any other questions? Please don't be shy. I will answer anything you got. You got a special agent on the phone. More than happy to talk to you guys.
There's a follow-up from that from John Flores. That's who the initial question was from. So we have multiple grants from several agencies, but with each new grant, we create a new fund code. So it sounds like that is the best management.
I'm not really the guy that should be able to answer on like how you need to set up your accounts. I just know that when we go in there and we see that all the money comes into a single bank account, that's commingling of federal funds. That's not necessarily an illegal thing. It's just usually in the grants, you'll usually see that they want you to structure your money in some way. It all depends on like how the grant's written, how you're working with the agency. We just use that as our ability to open up an investigation with another agency because we can't show where that money initially like originated from. Any other questions? Everybody's so quiet.
I had a question to just through your presentation, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely.
I was wondering about you when you were going over suspension and debarment. If someone goes through that process, and is that status permanent?
No, so it only lasts. So like you saw there, it said I believe debarred for 10 years. Suspension is usually up to 3 years max. So it's not an indefinite. It's always up to like it's usually 3 years is the length of time someone's given.
Thank you.
And we are not the adjudicating official on that. That would be actual EPA. We provide the information to them, and they give it to what's called the suspension or the SDO, the suspension debarment officer, or something along those lines. And they make the determination as to what kind of suspension or debarment the person will receive. They just ask us for all the information that we've collected or what we can't provide, and then they make the determination.
Here's a follow-up to that from John. Once someone has completed their suspension and debarment, will it show in their record, or would they have?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I would have to look at the website. I believe that once it's done, you're taken off that list. And I think the only way to find out about it would be to, I'm not sure on that answer. I would have to follow up on that, but check the website, which let me see if I can get you. I'll provide you the website, Jeanette, to see
Okay.
To distribute to look up and to do the research to see who's on that list or who's not. It's out there for the public, so it's public information. All right. Anything else?
I think too, if anyone has any questions, I think at this point you can unmute yourself and ask too if you want to have a conversation about it.
Yeah, please. I'm going to.
Hey, Chris, this is John. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll just ask my question. It's kind of a long one. I typed it out. So I was just curious, like, let's say someone were both sentenced to prison, like the examples you gave, like the 18 months, and they were sentenced to 3 years of either suspension and debarment. Does a suspension and debarment start with their prison sentence, or would that start, does it run, I guess, what is it, concurrently, or would it run consecutively? How does that work?
It's not connected at all. So here's people believe that suspension debarment is an actual punishment. It's actually an administrative action. It's kind of like splitting hairs. I get it. It kind of feels like it's a punishment, but basically, it is not something that should ever be considered as the same as someone going to prison. So because someone goes to prison, does not have anything to do with suspension and debarment. Two separate processes. One is punishment. One is an administrative action because someone has just been found to, the government can't trust them with money, so they're going to back off and not allow them to have it. The suspension debarment starts, so the dates that happen actually go, it all depends. All right, let's do it this way. If someone is indicted, it makes it a lot easier for suspension and debarment. If they are indicted, that information is provided to the SDO over at EPA, and they're able to take that indictment because the bar to prove someone needs to be either suspended or debarred is much, much lower than what would be for someone to be found guilty in a court of law. To be found guilty, you have to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. For suspension debarment, it's administrative action. It's if the SDO believes that the person committed the crime or committed the wrongdoing. So it's subjective. It's not the same level as being found guilty somewhere. So after someone's indicted, or if they're arrested for that crime, like that information can be provided to the SDO, then they can use that as the facts to make a determination whether the person can be suspended or debarred. So the person could start their suspension or debarment well before ever going to prison, if they're ever found guilty in the system. Now, just because the information has been provided to the SDO, it doesn't mean that they can't provide their own information. The SDO is not just going to make this decision in a vacuum with only what we provide them. They take what we have, they review it, then they reach out to the individual or the institution and say, hey, this is what we have. Can you explain? And if so, like, why is it that it's this way? And then we'll make our determination. So they give the person usually about 30 days after being noticed to the person to respond back. And you can ask for extensions. I had one incident where a lady was able to extend for, I want to say, up to 6 months, which is almost unheard of. But just because of the situation, she kept asking for extensions, and they provided it to her. So they're very accommodating when it comes to working with people. But going back to when a prison starts and when suspension starts, it all depends on if we provide the information to the SDO after the person's already gone to prison. Then it could start after they've gone to prison, but we usually get the ball rolling a little bit earlier to make sure that while they're pending their trial and pending going to jail if they're found guilty, that can sometimes take years. And during that time, do we want that person working on government grants or government contracts? Well, the answer would be no, usually. So that's why we want to get the ball rolling. So they could have already served, or they could have already been debarred for 1 year before they even go to jail. Did I make that way too long and confusing?
There's a follow-up question too from Theodore. How is restitution determined?
By a judge. So we have no say in that. Again, that's all in the Department of Justice. That's going to be sometimes by a judge, and sometimes it's just through, I'll say the majority of the time, it's through bargaining between the U.S. Department of Justice or the U.S. Attorney's Office and Defense Counsel. So they're going to come up with some number, or they're going to come up with some way that they want to, like, where they're able to meet at, and then the threshold or the required amount that they have to go as per like the statute or what the law requires, and they can negotiate with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We're usually left in the dark. We find out at the end, and then it's like over for us. You're muted right now.
Thank you. I think, again, if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
This is Theodore. I'll add another question. At statute of limitations.
Are you asking what is the statute of limitations?
Yes.
So it depends on the crime. But usually with white collar crime, it's about 5 years.
Thank you.
Yeah. Usually when you get a question like that, like someone you usually see it like a camera, that kind of thing is like, oh yeah, I'm in the clear. We're good. Not that I'm accusing you of that, Theodore.
Well, I think I have to respond. I hope not.
Perfect.
This is a safe space to ask any questions you want.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And most of your cameras are turned off, so we can't even see what you look like. So we're all good.
Transparency.
I'm fine, man. No, I'm just trying to just give me a little bit of a hard time. But usually, like, I'm used to people asking something like that, and like you just kind of see it's like, what are you thinking, buddy? Like, nothing. All right, thanks.
Well, thank you. I found this pretty fascinating, this presentation. I learned a lot, so it was good. I can say, with our tribe here, we do get a lot of grants. Like I asked that question, we do set up a different fund code for each grant from different agencies that comes in. Like you said, not that you can put it all in one pot, but it makes it harder to know even when you're doing your reporting, the separate grants, if you've done, even if you're not doing anything wrong, like how to track the money so you know what to put in your financial reports each quarter and year. So I found this pretty helpful and insightful. And we go through an audit every year here at San Pasqual, and we've had pretty much almost every year one of my grants, whether it's an EPA grant or a BOE grant or something, gets selected for the audit, and it's always been pretty pleasant experience as long as you got all your paperwork lined up, and your documentation is always key. So we try to document everything here at San Pasqual. The more documentation, the better.
So there is one last thing that I'll bring up with you guys, and it's more of a, hey, public awareness, keep your eyes and ears out. Since COVID has hit, the snake oil salesmen have jumped out and are chasing after every last dime they can. We've had a lot of investigations that have kicked off with people trying to pass their services off as either approved by the EPA, registered with the EPA, that their product is exempt from EPA registration of FIFRA rules and regulations, and they charge a lot of money for what they do. So I'm throwing it out there to use caution when you're looking for those companies that can come in and potentially sanitize or clean or offer certain services to your tribe or your organizations or whatever you have that might need that type of service. Use caution. Do your research. You guys have ready access to the professionals. Like you have points of contact within the EPA that you can reach out to and say, hey, is this a legit service? And if you don't know, can you get me in touch with somebody in the EPA that might know if it is, because I just don't know. We've had organizations or companies that have targeted tribes specifically because they knew that there was CARES Act, there was disaster relief money, there was FEMA money, and they knew that if they go in there and they offer these cleaning services, which was authorized under FEMA and CARES Act, that they could siphon off that money from you guys that could have been used for something that's probably a little bit more legitimate. I'm just throwing that caution out there. I mean, it's COVID. We've been doing this for about 7 months now with COVID going on, and it has the potential to keep going. So just be very aware, be very cautious, and do your research with it. And then if you ever have like a company that's coming up and it just sounds like it's ridiculous, like, hey, we can come in and we can sanitize your facility And that sanitization, like the sanitizing service that we do, it'll last an entire year. It's where all you have to do is wipe it down with water and a rag. Guys, there's no science that's behind any of that. Like, there's no product that can do anything that's close to that. There are companies out there selling it. Pay attention to what they're saying is for the efficacy. Pay attention to what they're saying that their product can do. If it sounds too good to be true, question it. We have investigations, as I said, that have been going on like this for quite a while now, and it's not an uncommon thing now for us.
Another maybe last offer for people to unmute themselves and ask questions. I agree, this has been a very interesting session. All right, well, it looks like all questions have been answered.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for attending and listening to us speak. Please keep our contact information. If you have any questions about what we can do, or like if you have something that's just like the hair on the back of the neck is just going up a little bit, please hit us up and let us know. We'll be happy to talk with you guys.